Hello, welcome to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm McKelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 103 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 29 of A Clash of Kings, that's Tyrion 7.
And what the plan is, as it always is, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. But hopefully, we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader mail. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll provide some interesting additional information, which will be handy, particularly if you're not reading along. How are you, McKelly?
I'm doing well. It's the Olympics.
Yes, the Olympics are going on, yes.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen any of it, and then I saw quite a bunch of it just recently, so...
Oh.
I was gonna ask you actually, which sport do you think is most distant from the version of that sport that we mere mortals play?
Oh my gosh, that's a fantastic question.
You see, let me give you a counterexample. Soccer. Soccer is recognizably what soccer is. I mean, I play soccer.
Right.
I admit I'm not as good as the people who play at the Olympics, but it's clearly soccer, what we're doing. But there are clearly sports where there is a gulf. I mean, not just a gulf, but like, sort of like an entirely different mindset between what they're doing and what we would do.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, well, I'll tell you from Molly's perspective, she thinks it's swimming.
It's swimming, yeah.
We were watching Katie Ledecky last night win the gold in the 800-meter free, and she was just like, I want to go as fast as she does. How does anyone humanly swim that long, that fast? But what did you have in mind?
The two that really struck me were the volleyball, because you and I played a little volleyball.
I had that thought just now, actually, as well. Yeah,
the volleyball is absolutely incredible. I mean, the power and the they look like they're on stilts or trampolines or something.
It is amazing. Molly's really big into volleyball right now because she's watching this anime show that's about a volleyball team. And she has had me watch one episode. I did not understand that that's what anime is about. Like the facial expressions they get, like when things happen, are incredibly over the top and stuff. And I was like, what is happening? And she's like, oh, that's just part of anime. But so she's super into it. So we've been watching a lot of the volleyball around the house lately.
The other one I was going to mention was table tennis.
Oh, goodness. Yes.
The women's final of the table tennis between two Chinese ladies was I was just watching it. I was just like, it's inhuman what they're doing. You just could not get that back.
They stand so far away.
Right. Oh my goodness.
I have what I would call a ping pong table right outside this door here next to the room I'm in. And we've played, but we stand about maybe 6 inches to a foot away from the edge of the table. Their feet back there. Yeah, it is amazing.
Yeah, truly amazing. Yeah. I also really enjoyed. I have a bit of a bee in my bonnet about the quality of the coverage here. My favourite bit of commentary so far was during I think they played to 4 games in the table tennis.
Okay.
And I think the score was like 3-2. And so it was 2 Chinese ladies. And the commentator said, a Chinese gold is the expectation. I'm like... I can imagine saying that in round 1, but like this close to the end, it was like that feels like an absolute certainty at this point. Yeah?
Maybe they could both get disqualified or something.
But the other one I just wanted to mention, and this one, obviously, weightlifting doesn't really qualify because weightlifting is, it's clearly what people who do weightlifting in a gym do. It's the same thing.
Sure.
Just the numbers are higher,
Right. Yeah.
And
yeah.
The one that I watched a woman from Taiwan or Taipei win the gold in the under 59 kilograms section. So she's under 130 pounds for you.
Okay, good. I appreciate the conversion.
And she successfully clean and jerked 293 pounds over her head, 133 kilograms.
Wow.
Yeah. And those numbers are so big, I was like, I couldn't really think about what those numbers were. So I tried to sort of convert it into something that I would understand. And I've never lifted weights, so I have no idea what I could lift. But I can imagine a scenario in which I train and get stronger and fitter, and at the end of that, I could do clean and jerk of like 100 pounds. I think it would be hard. I think it would be really like the maximum, and I'm talking about theoretical, because I've definitely never done it, but I think that's not inconceivable. Now, go on, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I don't know. I mean, I do primarily just weight train. I don't do much cardio, but I don't do clean and jerk, so I don't really know how it converts.
But what do you think you could do? I mean, because you do some weights, so you know, if you were to do that and you've got a little bit of training on technique, what do you think you could do?
Gosh, I have no idea. I don't think I could do nearly 300 pounds because clean and jerk. You lift that and then you got to put it over your
chest and then put it over your head. Exactly.
I could probably, if I worked at it for a while, get over 200 pounds, but I don't know.
Okay, good. So my 100 is not ridiculous. I mean, that's within my realm of possibility.
Yes.
I definitely couldn't do it today, I'm sure of that, but I think I could get it. Okay, so then I started thinking about what this now I'm going to use an adjective that's somewhat derogatory, but she's a little lady. She's not a big human being.
Yeah, you said she weighed 130 pounds. That's
the maximum she can weigh. So if I were to do my theoretical, never done, maximum clean and jerk, and held that thing over my head, she could come up beneath me and lift me and my weight above her head.
Solid point. She could put you up like a cheerleader, you know.
I was like,
be the top of the pyramid.
It blew my mind.
That is pretty amazing. Grief. Yeah. Oh wow, that is it's why they're the best in the world.
Yes.
Anyway,
yeah, we should get down to business.
I guess so.
Last time we saw Tyrion, he was very busy. He was poisoning his sister Cersei while she was disarmed
that takes time.
By news of the Baratheon boys' family squabble. He was sending Cleos Frey back to Robb Stark with unlikely demands. He was dismissing Sir Alistair Thorne's pleas for help at the Wall, while being simultaneously troubled by those pleas. And lastly, he was taking that rat Pycelle into custody for betraying his trust to Cersei. All right, why don't we give him the summary of this one?
Okay, summary that I haven't read ahead of time, so this is going to go smoothly, I'm sure.
All right. So now they know who's responsible for this. If there's any mistakes, they know it's mine.
Podrick tells Tyrion that Lancel is waiting for the hand. It's past midnight, so Tyrion assumes that his sister is hoping to catch him napping, but Tyrion works half the night. He musses his hair and feigns bleariness to fool the foolish Lancel. The 16-year-old is haughty and rude to his older cousin. Tyrion pities him, though. He's a puppet being used, and he doesn't know it.
Cersei's demands are that Pycelle be released, and Jacelyn Bywater arrested for refusing to do the Queen Regent's bidding. Tyrion's pleased about the latter, showing that Bywater was probably told to release Pycelle, but refused. Tyrion punctures Lancel's bravura by asking if his knighthood was for his part in the murder of the king or for bedding the Queen. Lancel tries to bluster, but Tyrion threatens to take both of these things to the new king. Lancel crumbles and confirms that it was Cersei who gave him instructions to soak the king in wine on the boar hunt, not him. It wasn't his idea.
He didn't put up much of a fight there, did he?
No. But honestly, having laid that out, I know this is part of the discussion, but you murdered his father and now you're sleeping with his mother. You don't have to be Joffrey to fly off the handle of this news, I would feel.
Good point. When you put it that way, Lancel begs for mercy and Tyrion provides an out. Work for Tyrion and your secret remains safe. A drowning man will clutch to anything, and Lancel rapidly turns his coat. Lancel leaves, and Tyrion muses that it's good that Kevan has other sons, because Lancel most certainly won't survive should Jaime return to King's Landing. If Jaime doesn't kill him from jealousy, then Cersei probably would, to prevent Jaime from finding out.
Tyrion sends Pod to rouse Bronn and have 2 horses prepared. They ride to Chataya's brothel, where Bronn manages to find a way to occupy his time, while Tyrion fulfills a tryst with Shae. Alayaya is busy when Tyrion arrives, so he takes a cup of wine. Not Chataya's usual standard, but times are lean in King's Landing. 2 of the other ladies have a bet as to who can lure Tyrion away from Alayaya first. He likes them both, but has only eyes for Shae.
When Alayaya is free, they head up to the turret room with the secret door He asks what she does while he's gone, and she explains that she'll catch up on sleep, but that she's learning to read. He agrees that sleep is good, but reading is even better. He rides alone to Shay's manse, hearing some drunken singing in the city. He's reminded of Taisha, who sang to him. He's still, after years, stung by the revelation that she was just a paid whore. At Shay's, he's met by the ghastly collection of guards, hand-picked not to tempt Shay's eye, but to keep her safe. It occurs to Tyrion that he's more hideous than any of the guards, but he dismisses that thought.
Within, Shay is asleep naked. He realizes that he's finally able to forget about Taisha because he's found someone else to fill the void, Shay. He makes love to her while she barely wakes. Afterwards, she tells him she had a wonderful dream. Tyrion thinks that the whole thing, the murder, the intrigue, the whole game, is real and not a dream, and he's at the centre of it, and he loves it. And her. But note, he only thinks that. He doesn't tell Shay.
Right, yes.
It's something of a non-event compared to recent Tyrion chapters. I mean, they've been jam-packed with stuff, but this one's kind of like in some respects, actually, and partly because I spoiled this in TV stuff, we already knew that Lancel was working for Tyrion from the TV show, so this is kind of just a sort of slightly different sequence, and it all kind of makes sense that, that Tyrion needs a spy in Cersei's quarters.
Right.
Lancel's the perfect patsy.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's really... I had forgotten where this chapter was, and when we finished Bran, because Bran was not exactly the most action-packed chapter either, I thought, well, we've got a Tyrion chapter coming up. He'll give us a lot of good info, and then I got to it, and I was like, oh, this one, okay.
I do think it's important that we check in on Shay, though, because, I mean, it's important that Tyrion falls in love with her. That's a important narrative arc going on. And if we never heard from her, I mean, his visits to her are kind of like, yeah, okay, we get it. He's going to go there and do what he does, but we don't really need to read about it. But we have to be reminded of it. Otherwise, you'd forget she was there, and you'd forget.
Solid point. Yeah.
That Tyrion genuinely is in love with her.
Yeah, that's a good point. It definitely has a purpose.
Yeah. So chronologically, Cersei, we discover, is back in good health. If you remember, Tyrion poisoned her with a vial that he took from Pycelle's room, which he put in her wine, which meant she was stuck in the toilet for a few days. Yes. Well, at least one day, I think, was what we decided.
Yeah, we don't know exactly because we don't know how long it's been since he met with Sir Cleos.
Right, yeah.
But he's thinking he should have given her a little larger dose because he was enjoying the Cersei-free days of his rule.
Yeah. So Lancel acts like a jerk. He calls Tyrion the imp, and he rejects the drink with him, and he's enjoying the fact that he's coming down on Tyrion with Cersei's demands. And he actually says, "I come at the Queen's behest, not to drink with you, imp."
Yeah.
So I do think Lancel's character is, perfect product of where he is in life. I mean, he's highborn, good-looking, recently knighted, only 16 years of age. How that person could not be a jerk is, it just couldn't happen,
Yeah, I take your meaning. There, I mean, Robb's not a jerk, and he probably fits. We don't know if Robb's good looking or not, but he fits all the rest of those things.
And a Lannister.
Yes, there you go. There's the key. Yes, bred with a golden spoon in his mouth.
So the demands are that he must release Grandmaster Pycelle, who's a staunch friend of the Queen and under her personal protection. And then there's a little debate which we've had about who's in charge here, because Lancel says that the regent rules and the hand serves,
right.
But not sure Tyrion sees that the same way.
No, it all comes down to numbers, like whoever has the numbers is who's going to rule.
So you don't think the written rules of heraldry are as important here?
Not so much. We learned, Ned learned that the hard way. He did not have the upper hand, even though he had the right by law.
Yeah.
Which, Cersei pulls a rather Ned Stark-like move here. she has Lancel give Tyrion a letter with the commands of releasing Grand Maester Pycelle, which I thought was rather ironic, because she expects Tyrion to obey such a written decree. But when Ned had the written decree that he would be King Regent, she tore it up and called it like a paper shield or something like that.
Yeah, actually, just a thought here. Is it possible that the written decree was for Bywater?
Oh, maybe. I can't recall if the wording. It might have been for both. I can't recall if it because he never opened it. Lancel tries to hand it to him and he waves it away.
But I'm wondering if Lancel was sent to Bywater with this, like, hey.
Oh, yes.
And Bywater said, "You got to take that to the hand of the king because you don't have authority over me, so you're going to take that to the hand of the king."
Yeah.
And so it ended up in Tyrion's hands, never intending to be.
That's a good
She
point.
would have just told Tyrion.
Yes, that's a good point.
But then, question there about Lancel's gumption. Did he go straight from Bywater to Tyrion, or did he go back to Cersei? It sounds like he went back to Cersei because there was a secondary command to arrest Bywater for
Yeah, I was just thinking about
disobeying.
that. Yeah, because...
Well, that might be Lancel extemporizing, saying, well, he disobeyed the queen, so he needs to be arrested too. It might not be Cersei saying that, it might be Lancel.
Very much so, yes. Yeah, depends on... Although, at the beginning of the chapter, Tyrion says, does Lancel think to catch me in a sleepy haze? And he thinks, no, Lancel scarcely thinks at all. This is Cersei's doing. So, maybe Lancel doesn't have the intelligence to think about doing something on his own. Maybe he just follows Cersei's lead. But yeah, it's very possible that after Bywater rejected him, which we don't know. We're just making an assumption here that he could have taken this and ran with it and come to Tyrion.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you're right to sort of like draw the analogy with Ned. Ned would have opened that letter, read it carefully, and obeyed it to the letter, whereas Tyrion doesn't even bother to read it. He says, "Oh, sure."
Well, yeah, I mean, in some ways he would have. I don't know that he would have necessarily followed Cersei's request, but I don't think he would have tried to turn Lancel either.
No. Nor would he have arrested Pycelle for simply reporting things to the queen.
Right.
Which isn't actually a crime,
Yeah, I think Ned's, he thinks... So Tyrion thinks about Ned that he wasn't prepared to play the Game of Thrones at the level that Cersei was playing at. That you gotta play her game back at her. It's the only way you're gonna win. But I think the primary one of them, there's several differences, but one of them between Tyrion and Ned is that Ned was too trusting. He trusted Littlefinger to set up the gold cloaks without double checking. Tyrion didn't just trust someone to get rid of Slynt. He got rid of Slynt himself. Now, except for the part where he put him on the boat headed for the Night's Watch. He did trust Bywater to handle that.
Right.
But the other main thing is instead of shedding loyal men left and right, Tyrion's been focused on gaining loyal men and removing those of others such as Cersei and Littlefinger, the Red Cloaks and Jaina Slynt.
Yeah.
Ned wasn't interested in that.
Yeah, Bywater's rejection of Cersei's order is got to be encouraging to Tyrion, because Tyrion wasn't 100% sure that Bywater would be his man. But the scenario we just talked through, where Lancel comes with a command to Bywater, and Bywater says, "You need to take that to the hand of the king," that doesn't necessarily prove loyalty to Tyrion. It certainly suggests it, but I mean, that actually could just be good, sort of like, I'm washing my hands of this mess,
It's above my pay grade, man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And above yours too, Lancel.
Yeah, that's a solid point. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. I was thinking the same as what you said originally, that it's a major arrow in Tyrion's quiver to know that the gold cloaks are securely in his pocket.
Certainly is, or at least willing to let him know that there's something coming. I mean, with Cleos Frey's arrival, Bywater let him know first. There's grounds for optimism for Tyrion on Bywater's allegiance.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes. you have to imagine Slint would have done as asked. Even when even as Littlefinger's man, he still seemed very high on pleasing the Lannisters. So
right. Well, if you're going to be a Team Lannister, then do what the Lannisters say.
Good point. Yeah. So Tyrion asks Lancel, did Cersei have you knighted before or after she took you into her bed? And Lancel doesn't immediately respond, but there's a flicker in his eyes, which is enough to give Tyrion the info that he needs, that his the rumor that he heard from Varys is correct. So we didn't know this. We didn't know. Well, did you mention it in the when the comparison to the TV show that there was a sexual relationship going on here? I can't remember.
I don't think I had mentioned it, no, because that scene, although that scene is in the past now in the TV show, it didn't have anything relevant to the book, so it didn't,
Yeah.
There's scenes in the TV show that I never mentioned in comparison to the TV show because they're added.
Right.
They're not derived from the chapters, so I don't think I mentioned it, but it has happened at this point.
Okay. Yeah, because, I mean, we've seen Lancel around Cersei a lot in various scenes, including last chapter when he was serenading her in her bedroom before Tyrion poisoned her, but now we know that there was a sexual relationship going on here. And you got to wonder if she promised such favors, like sexual favors, to Lancel if he killed Robert, or if she used her sexual prowess to get him to do what she wanted.
I'm going to reject both of those ideas in favor of the next thing that Lancel says, because Lancel says, Tywin told me to do exactly what Cersei ordered.
Right, that's the other option.
Yeah, I think she ordered him to, well, I mean, he admits this later on. She ordered me to give Robert the strong wine on the boar hunt, and I'm thinking she ordered him to her bed as well.
Yeah, so you're thinking that it was not actual using her feminine persuasion to control Lancel. She just wanted a poor copy of Jaime, as Tyrion thinks. A poor copy of Jaime is better than nothing in her bed at all.
Yeah, I mean, does she need to sleep with a guy to get loyalty? No, she does not. The way she gets loyalty is by being genuinely scary and threatening.
Good point.
I think this is all her. This is all her wishes.
I wondered if, as Robert Squire, if Lancel had any reservations about killing his own king, or if he's just truly a Lannister and he was in there knowing he's not really Robert Squire. He's more of just a Lannister.
Well, if I'm Lancel, my conscience is clear. I'm just providing him the wine.
Right.
The boar killed him. I mean, yeah, he shouldn't have drunk that much, but I was told to help him drink that much. He could have said no any time, and he's the king.
Good point.
I couldn't have forced it down his throat. So I sleep at night if I'm Lancel because of that.
Yeah, that's a solid point. Yeah. So Tyrion thinks that Varys was right. So when he sees the flicker in Lancel's eyes, he thinks Varys is right, and it seems like he and Varys are working pretty closely together on some things, because Varys is also the one that hired Shay's guards.
Right.
But
which of course means that Varys could put one of his spies in there.
Oh yes.
One of her guards could be one of his spies. So he probably knows exactly which days Tyrion goes to her.
Yeah. Yeah, really, is there any point in trying to hide things from Varys? I mean,
right. I would work as closely as possible with him.
Yeah, right.
Better to know what he knows than to hope that he doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting decision to send Lancel. He's young and inexperienced, and he might let something slip. I mean, sure enough, he lets a lot slip in this conversation.
Sure
he admits to regicide during this conversation. So.
Yeah, even you could just see him bragging about him and Cersei. He's
right.
I mean, he's very full of himself right now, and you have to imagine that this newfound sexual relationship with the Queen surely has a large part to play in why he's so full of himself.
Yes, as a 16-year-old, if I was sleeping with the beautiful Queen, I probably would tell my buddies.
Yes, right. And anyone who will listen.
Yes. And by buddies, I mean anybody on Earth. But my thought about this was that she's actually sending a message to Tyrion that all the Lannister family are with her, not him.
Oh, like
that's why I think
a subtle message. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Hadn't thought about it that
way.
Which
is a miscalculation here, because obviously, he's able to turn him and get information from him that she didn't want Tyrion getting. But
yeah,
that's why I think she chose him.
Okay, that makes sense. I had in a few minutes. I have thoughts on Lancel's existence altogether at this point, but first, let's talk about so Tyrion kind of drops the bomb and threatens to tell Joffrey that Lancel killed his father to bed his mother, and Lancel panics and starts to beg and offers to leave King's Landing and please just let me leave, basically like do it for my father. And if he weren't so young and naive and thought this through and knew the relationship between Tyrion and Joffrey better, he could probably have put money down that Joff wouldn't believe anything Tyrion says, especially if his mother is saying the opposite, saying he's just trying to drive a wedge between us or something like that.
You know what? I don't agree. I think if you think it through more carefully, it doesn't matter. Joffrey and Tyrion's relationship doesn't matter to this news, because the thing is, you don't have to hear terrible news from a close friend to believe it. If an enemy tells you terrible news, you think that if Tyrion wanted Joffrey to find this out, he tells him quietly. He says, Joffrey, you know what? I've got two pieces of information for you, and I don't want you to act on them now. I want you to pay attention to what's going on. One is, Lancel, Lancel was your father's squire. He intentionally plied him with too much wine on the day of the boar hunt to kill him. And do you know why he did that? He did that because he wanted to sleep with your mother. You keep your eye on them and see if you don't think that's going on. And Joffrey would reach his own conclusions. And doesn't matter that Tyrion's his enemy. He'd be like, you know what? I see it.
Do you think Joffrey has the intelligence and patience to do that, though, without just lashing out and bringing his mother to his chambers immediately?
Now that goes to the relationship between Tyrion and Joffrey, because if Tyrion just goes up to them and broadly announces it, then Cersei and Lancel go into denial mode and Joffrey sides with them.
Right.
So you got to do it subtly. Now you are relying on Joffrey being subtle, but Joffrey would be predisposed to not believe that.
Yes, you're right.
He wouldn't run off the handle. He'd say, "Don't give them any warning that you're paying attention to this. Just pay attention." And I think Joffrey would like the responsibility and intrigue of that.
Yeah,
and I think he would see it for himself.
Maybe,
like you said, whenever we see Cersei, Lancel is in her orbit at the moment.
Yeah. Now, do you think? So, say Joffrey did believe Tyrion. We know he wasn't close to his father. I mean, back in the first Sansa chapter of this book, Tyrion expressed his condolences to Joffrey, and Joffrey forgot who he was expressing his condolences for. And Robert's death made Joffrey king. So I wonder, as I say that, I'm also thinking this is Joffrey. If he has a chance to take retribution on someone, he probably is going to do it. So I'm answering my own question here.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't fond of my father, but you killed him and then you slept with my mother. And I'm a psychopath.
Yeah. I see where this is heading. Yeah, you're right.
So Tyrion, Tyrion makes clever statements. He's like, you want me to keep secrets from the king? I need to tell him all these things, And Lancel, basically begs for his life. And so Tyrion gives it to him. He says, well, stay close to her, keep her trust, but tell me everything she's doing, who she's meeting, what she's saying. I want all that information. And that is a trump card right there.
Yes. No, but what do you do if you're Lancel? Do you betray Cersei for Tyrion, like your job is now to do, or do you go back to Cersei and tell her, Tyrion knows, and he's got me spying for you?
Coercing me into spying, yeah. That second one is actually a very good idea. I think Lancel is too much of an idiot to think of it. I think he will just, he's just a pawn.
Right.
He isn't going to come up with that himself. But actually, it's very smart. If you go back to her and tell her that, she can use you appropriately.
Right. Okay, well, I'm going to feed him all the wrong information then.
Except Cersei is not subtle enough to do that, because Cersei would feed him stupidly wrong information, and Tyrion would smell it a mile away.
Possibly, yeah. Although I do question Tyrion using the info that he gives Lancel here. He says to Lancel, go back to Cersei. Tell her you frightened me. Tell her I don't want any more strife between the two of us. I will consult her before I do anything else. And I thought, that's so out of character for Tyrion. That might be over the top info for him to bring to her.
I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, it's a good story for Lancel to tell, and she might hear it as just Lancel being, overstating it.
Right, sure, that's true. I hadn't thought about that.
But I do agree with what you're saying. I mean, it felt like Tyrion was like, never in a million years would Tyrion say those words, but that doesn't mean Lancel wouldn't interpret what Tyrion says to that. So maybe that's the way it works.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, she has to cut through his bravado, I guess. But yeah. So Tyrion kind of sweetens the pot a little bit and offers a silver lining and says, if you play your part correctly, being a knight is nothing. There could be a lordship in it for you, Lancel. And I recalled another up-jumped man offered a lordship recently, and that didn't work out so well for
Lord Lancel. If Lancel thought about the comparison with himself and Slynt, he would think, well, I'm his cousin and a Lannister.
Yes,
I should get a lordship anyway. Slynt was low-born and a butcher's son.
Yes,
he gets nothing.
Right. I had that same thought. I mean, Lancel is the oldest son of Kevin Lannister. He's going to end up with a lordship regardless, almost certainly, as long as he survives this.
Right. He did mention fleeing, and that probably is still an option here. But honestly, I think at 16, living in King's Landing, sleeping with the Queen, life's pretty cushy, even if you are spying for Tyrion,
Right, yeah. I think things could be worse. You could be in the black cells like Pycelle.
Right.
Well,
or living rough as a hedge knight.
True. Yeah, you might be ultimately have a longer life expectancy in that role, though. In this situation,
possibly. But he probably doesn't see the danger to his life. He's like, oh, I'm in the middle of all these intrigues. It's so exciting.
Yes, yeah, and he's young, so like we've talked about in recent previous episodes, when you're young, you think you're pretty invincible. So he probably doesn't realize quite how dangerous the situation he's in here.
So I want you to take the next part because I want to answer it.
Okay.
Because this is your comment about the decision to give Pycelle to Cersei.
Okay. So Tyrion does agree to release Pycelle, which is one of the two demands that Cersei has laid upon him, which does give credence to Lancel coming back to her and saying, all these things.
I scared him.
Yeah, because he does release Pycelle. But my question is it wise to give Pycelle to Cersei? Is it just a harmless thing to do, or is he making a mistake here? We know he's focused on setting Cersei up, so allowing this is part of that illusion. But is it ultimately a wise thing to do in the long run?
Yeah, well, you can expand on that if you want, but I have a straight answer to this. Okay, imagine you're playing chess, right? When you're first learning chess, if you move a pawn to attack a knight, you hope that the other person doesn't notice that you're attacking that knight. Okay? That's sort of like base level chess. You're like, ooh, maybe he won't see it and I'll get that knight. Okay? But at any level of chess, the person is going to notice it. You moved your pawn and now it's attacking the knight. They're going to move the knight. They're going to protect the knight.
Uh-huh.
But at the higher level of chess, you're attacking that knight not because you think you're going to capture it, but because you think that in order to save that knight, your opponent is going to weaken their position.
Right. I get you.
And that's what Pycelle always was here to Tyrion. He doesn't care whether Pycelle lives or dies, whether Pycelle's on the small council or not. He wanted to know who Cersei's spy was. Got it. It's Pycelle. And secondly, he wants to weaken Cersei's position by her response to his threat on Pycelle. And that's exactly what's happened. By sending Lancel with this information, he's turned Lancel. Now he's got a spy in her ranks, and that's because he captured Pycelle. He's giving Pycelle back. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
He doesn't care one iota.
I agree. All that makes perfect sense, and I agree that he doesn't care that he's releasing Pycelle. And it at some level, it explains why he reacted so harshly to Pycelle's being in Cersei's camp, because we were like, but you're a Lannister and he's working for the Lannisters.
Right.
So that explanation, what you just described there, explains possibly why he reacted the way he did and threw him in the black cells. But what I'm thinking of is Pycelle's been around for a long time, and he's still probably loyal to the Lannisters, but likely not so much Tyrion anymore.
Correct,
so
correct.
Whether or not he's on the small council, you have to figure that now he's going to be looking for opportunities to get revenge on Tyrion. And we know Tyrion is just the acting hand of the king. So at some point, Tyrion's power is going to be diminished. And if Tywin survives in the Riverlands and makes it to King's Landing to fulfill his role as hand of the king, and it's just dangerous to have someone who's still got the cachet of being the Grand Maester gunning for you. And now I know he's a doddering old fool some of the times, but other times he's not quite as much as he pretends to be. So it just feels like it's dangerous to leave him dangling out there.
Okay, how I would contend that one, I would say Tyrion's only danger is Cersei.
Yes,
that's the threat. You know, Pycelle's just a foot servant to Cersei, so it just doesn't matter. You can let her have her foot servants. You can let her have Lancel. Just doesn't matter. They can exist in her orbit. The only person to be afraid of is Cersei herself. Now, she may use them as the person who actually cuts your head off, but she was going to get someone to do it.
Right.
So, in many ways, having him exposed and there and speaking, and everything he knows, you know that Cersei knows, and everything he says, you know that Cersei is vetted, just makes him easier to deal with. And just a question here: are we sure that Tywin wants to be Hand of the King? I mean, he's the Lord of Casterly Rock. I mean, if I were him, I might go home when all this is over.
Yeah, that's a solid point. We don't know. I think a lot would depend on how he feels Tyrion is doing as acting Hand of the King. Right. Clearly, he didn't like what Cersei was up to because he sent Tyrion. Yeah. So, if Tyrion does a better job, maybe he'll feel like, well, I don't need to go there immediately. So I think that's what it'll depend upon.
So Tyrion feels bad for Lancel, figures he won't live out the year, and he's glad that his Uncle Kevin has 2 other sons.
Yeah, except for that one of his sons is Willem Lannister, who's currently captive of Robb Stark. So not exactly snuggly safe. Right. The other is Willem's twin brother Martin, and we haven't heard from him, but I assume he's in Lannisport or Casterly Rock at the moment.
Right. Tyrion's thinking is that he figures that Cersei will kill Lancel if she finds out that he's betraying her to Tyrion. Right. And if that doesn't happen, then when Jaime returns, either Cersei will kill Lancel because she wants to clear a space in her bed, or she won't, and Jaime will find out about what's been going on in his absence, and he'll kill Lancel. So
Tyrion
probably best that Lancel doesn't think all this through. To be honest,
it probably is. Just go blindly, blissfully through life. But so this is where I'll bring up my thoughts on Lancel still existing in the first place. Now, we know that he knows her role in killing of the king. He literally just rolled on her, like with very, very little. No fingernails were pulled out or anything. Just the threat of telling Joffrey, and he spilled his guts about all this. So, he's young and brash and naive, and it just feels dangerous letting him walk around the Red Keep. And so, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it past her to have taken him out so that there's no direct link back to between the strong wine being given to Robert and her.
But my argument there is, so when would he tell anyone this news? Maybe if Joffrey sort of like had him on the rack, he might say, I did give him too much wine, but I was being told to by your mother. Be like, I don't believe you.
Yeah, well, that's very possible.
You're an idiot squire who gave him too much wine, and for that you die, you know? There's not a big plot here. My mother loved my father.
Yeah, that's possible. It just seems like it would be easy to cover your bases.
In many ways, though, this goes to the haziness of that plan. If that plan was a little bit more certain to work,
right,
then her culpability becomes higher, and therefore her need to silence Lancel becomes higher.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
He plied him with wine.
Right.
You know, maybe she argues, if this comes out, she says, actually, I got this really good wine. It was delicious, and I knew that Robert would love it. And so I told Lancel, yeah, give him that wine.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was strong.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Robert loves drinking wine. And
right. I mean, it was a friendly thing to do. Now, if Lancel had, like, shot him with arrows, and she'd put poison on the tips of those arrows, that's a harder one to get rid of. He gave him wine.
I knew that he loved arrows and poison.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a point. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it from how weak, how gray of a plan it was to just use the wine.
Right, and that's why that's what's going to keep Lancel alive, because there's just, even if he were to crumble and tell the whole world, it just wouldn't matter. It just wouldn't matter. No one would listen. No one would believe. And even if everyone believed, they'd be just like, it's still an accident.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. All right. I will concede why she's keeping him alive for the moment.
Yeah. He's not safe. He's not out of the woods.
Right. If she finds out he's betrayed her, or Jaime comes back, he's in big trouble.
Right. So Tyrion starts to think about the former Hands of the Kings and how honest and noble they were, and Cersei devours them with her game, and now they're dead. I mean, he's thinking of both Jon Arryn and Ned Stark. So Tyrion still seems to think that Cersei has a role in Jon Arryn's death, and we've had a couple of contradictory, well, not contradictory, but opposite pieces of information to that. Pycelle said she had no role in it.
Right.
And we've had reason to question her involvement in Jon Arryn's death several times, most notably when she would not admit to it to Ned Stark, when she was confessing to incest and all kinds of things.
Right.
She denied being involved in Jon Arryn's death. So,
yeah,
so
you can see
now
why.
Tyrion doesn't necessarily know that. Tyrion wasn't privy to that conversation.
Right.
So we have more information than Tyrion.
True. That's true. Yeah, and you can see why he's hesitant to give up the idea, because she obviously benefited from the death of Jon Arryn, because Pycelle also told Tyrion Jon Arryn knew about the incest, so it certainly would, Tyrion would be aware that, she benefited a lot because that secret was kept safe from Jon Arryn getting it out there.
Right. But I don't think we're to the bottom of that mystery, because she didn't admit to it, and she had the opportunity to admit to it, and her inhibitions were down.
I agree. If it is Cersei, she is playing some sort of long game of why she's not copping to that when she's copped to so many other things.
Right.
But then Tyrion thinks about he's comparing himself to Jon Arryn and Ned, as Simon just said, and he thinks that it's their honor they're too honorable to play Cersei's game, basically. And I don't think it was honor as the major factor in Ned's failure. Now, of course, he could have saved himself several times if he had been less honorable. But like I said earlier, I really believe his biggest issue was that he was too trusting, not that he was so necessarily honorable that he did go to Cersei and give her a chance to flee with the kids. That was very honorable. But ultimately, he wasn't fact-checking. He was believing people. He believed when Littlefinger said, yeah, don't worry, we've got the gold cloaks in our pocket. Wink, wink. Finger guns.
Yeah. Yeah, you can be honourable without being that trusting. I mean, they are in many ways two sides of the same coin, you know. But
in some ways.
But you can definitely say, let's verify this stuff. Let's not just believe it. Yeah,
right.
It's true.
But he also Tyrion also compares himself to Ned and Jon Arryn in the fact that they're dead and he's never felt more alive. So you know. I'm sure it feels good to finally use his intellect for such a significantly greater purpose and to finally get respect for those abilities instead of being mocked for his inadequacies.
Right, and it's good for us too, because I mean Tyrion's a great character with lots to recommend him, but he's been wandering in the woods,
right?
You know, for the earlier part of the book. It's better to have him now with his hand on the levers of power.
Yeah, it's cool to see what seems to be rather brilliant mind can come up with for plots and schemes and such things. But I repeat, he's only the acting hand of the king. It's assumed that at some point Tywin will return, and we've not seen Tyrion make. I know he's got much more pressing matters than how to retain his power, but we've not seen him make any plans that will keep him in power. And I think that goes back to what you were asking earlier, that I think maybe his plan is to impress his father so that either when his father returns to King's Landing, maybe he will instill Tyrion at Casterly Rock, or his father will say, you know what, you're doing such a great job, just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, there's basically two of them and two jobs.
Yes.
There's being Lord of Casterly Rock and being Hand of the King. Yeah. So, yeah.
Now, we know how Tywin feels about Tyrion, and it's not great. So I'm sure that might factor in some way. But if he's doing an excellent job here in King's Landing, you know, I feel like it's the best he can do to try and prove to his father that he is capable.
Yep. So Tyrion and Bronn head off to Chataya's brothel, where they're not serving the quality of wine they used to. You can't get the good stuff. And Tyrion sort of says neither can he anymore.
Yeah, War with the Reach has its drawbacks. But I was thinking, you know, maybe a pinky finger of one of the Redwine twins delivered by a raven might get the Lannisters as many casks of Arbor gold as they desire.
Thank you, Joffrey. Tyrion has a conversation with Chataya, and as she walks away, he sort of admires her dignity and her elegance and thinks that it's uncommon in a madam or a prostitute. But then he also thinks that she sees her job as more like a priestess than a madam. And then that sort of brings him to the sort of like, wonders if that might be the secret to life. It's not what you're doing, it's the why you're doing it. You know?
Yeah.
Even a horrible job like being a prostitute, if you are doing it because you think you have a higher calling to it, it can make it more than just tolerable. It can make it, you know, a vocation, joy in some way.
That's a fantastic philosophy to take in life. Figure out the whys.
Well, yes,
doing
I mean,
things.
I'm not recommending prostitution. Let's be clear. But if you do it with a smile on your face and a song in your heart.
So he's stuck waiting because Alayaya, who, just a quick reminder, is Chataya's daughter, she's occupied at the moment. So this another prostitute named Dancy puts the hard sell on Tyrion, and we learn when Alayaya shows up that the reason she's doing so is because she has made a bet with another prostitute that she has 2 weeks to get Tyrion to choose her, or she's going to lose the set of black pearls that she has. And Tyrion feels bad about that, but I think maybe the underlying point there is that others are noticing that Tyrion is here a lot in this brothel and always chooses Alayaya. And are people going to start to ask questions about that?
Yeah. And then that makes me wonder: is it bringing danger to Alayaya?
Right. Sure. Because
people might think he's got a fondness for her that he actually has for Shae,
right,
and might try to use her as a leverage against him.
Yeah, certainly. She certainly spends a lot of time with him, it would appear. So it would at very least might be prudent to check into her and try and get some information from her.
Yeah, it'd be good if he could change which prostitute he goes up to the turret room with, but of course then that shares his secret, because they would notice if he disappeared for those 8 hours.
They might.
Probably. On the ride from the brothel to Shae's house, he hears music, he hears singing, and this reminds him of Taisha, his first wife. That's, if you remember, he and Jamie saved her from brigands that he married her. Tywin find out, had her gang raped, and the marriage annulled. She's haunted him half his life, but he feels like he doesn't need her anymore because he's got Shae.
Yeah. I know that matters of the heart will trump matters of the head in a lot of instances, but he's just lacking some foresight here. I mean, what's his long game with Shae? He can't sit down and say logically that he can continue to be in this power position and deal with these high matters of state and marry a prostitute. And at some point, even if Tywin doesn't come back to King's Landing and take over as Hand of the King, even if he goes to Casterly Rock, at some point he's going to want Tyrion to marry just for political reasons.
Yeah,
and it just seems like the.
But maybe you're right. Maybe the out here is that when Tywin comes and strips Tyrion of his role, Tyrion's free to do whatever he wants, and he marries Shae and goes to live happily ever after somewhere else. Washes his hands of all this.
Maybe. I think they'd probably have to go to Essos, though, because I don't think Tywin...
Possibly.
I don't think Tywin's going to condone him marrying a prostitute.
But Tywin will die one day, and Tywin's the real problem here. Well, I mean, honestly, everybody around him is a real problem here, because everybody wants leverage over him, and Shae is a definite way of getting leverage over him. But if Tywin dies, then at least the command to not marry her and not to take her with him is gone, and he could keep her as like a permanent concubine, even if he has to marry politically.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what his level of power is at that point.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it just feels like... clearly he's in love with Shae. He mentions that he's in love with Shae at the end of this chapter. But I could see that as being very problematic for his long-term goals.
Yeah. So the chapter ends with Tyrion contemplating that all of this is real, not a dream. The wars, the intrigues, the great bloody game of it, and him right at the centre. He loves it, and he loves his girl.
Yeah, he's... This last line makes me think the whole point of this chapter was that in this chapter we see two men really... feeling like they had things going. They were clicking on all cylinders, and one of which was brought back to Earth, being Lancel, was brought back to Earth by Tyrion, and the other he's on top of the world. I mean, he's doing really well. He's got everything he's ever wanted at this moment, and he's enjoying it. But what goes up often must come back down. So, how long will he continue to have everything going his way? At some point, the Baratheons might actually attack the city. Maybe that might change things. Or his father might come to King's Landing and take his role as Hand of the King and leave Tyrion with nothing again. Or maybe he'll be given a spot on the small council. We'll see, I guess. But I feel like that was the point of the chapter, was that last sentence.
Yeah.
Right now, everything is going Tyrion's way.
Yeah. Given the nature of George Martin, can only be foreshadowing of doom.
What?
All right, what background do you have for us?
Well, background was a little tough this week, as there wasn't a whole lot to to go on here, but I thought we'd focus on the Hand of the King thing. So Tyrion is the current Hand of the King, or acting Hand of the King anyway, to Joffrey Baratheon. Or I guess technically we know he's truly Joffrey Lannister, but anyway, the very first Hand of the King was also a Baratheon, Orys Baratheon, and he was thought to be Aegon the Conqueror's closest and truest friend, although it's pretty much taken as an open secret that Orys was actually Aegon's bastard half-brother, a son of Aerion Targaryen. However, there's not even so much as rumors regarding the specifics of Orys's parentage in regards to who his mother is, or whether she was just a random fling or a product of first night rights or something more than that. But Orys was raised to Hand of the King after Aegon...
Presumably on some level she must have been a Baratheon, otherwise how the hell did... Oh, no, but she must have been married to a Baratheon. I mean, how else did this kid get called Baratheon?
That's a very good point. Maybe he just gave her that
I mean,
name.
If her father was a Targaryen and her mother was a nobody, then...
How do you get the last name Baratheon? That's a good point. I don't know the answer to that. I have to look that up. See if the...
Presumably, his official father was a Baratheon.
Yeah, I guess so.
Although not biological, apparently.
Yeah, I've never heard talk of any other possible father. Maybe he came up with this last name himself.
Maybe that's it. Yes.
What do you want to call yourself?
Baratheon?
Anyway, Orys was raised to Hand of the King after Aegon's coronation at Aegon Fort, which was the precursor to the Red Keep. And Orys was a veteran of Aegon's War of the Conquest, leading the ground troops against House Durrandon in the Stormlands. He was involved in the First Dornish War, but taken captive and ransomed. However, before being returned to Aegon, the Dornish had the sword hand of all their captives removed. So this caused Orys to resign as Hand of the King, saying, "The king's hand should have a hand. I will not have men speaking of the king's stump."
Interesting. All right, comparison with the television show. Sorry about this. I totally spoiled all this last time I was talking about Tyrion and Lancel. Tyrion doesn't find Lancel in Cersei's chambers. Rather, he infers that something's going on when Lancel delivers a command to free Pycelle from Cersei to Tyrion in the middle of the night. Lancel is initially haughty, but breaks down as Tyrion quizzes him and wonders how the king would react to Lancel sleeping with the king's own mother. Lancel crumbles and agrees to work solely for Tyrion henceforth. So, basically, perfectly captured.
Yeah.
Chitalia and Alayaya are completely dropped. Shae works as a servant in the Red Keep, and Tyrion sees her all the time.
Yeah. What do you think of that as having been a better option?
As we've mentioned, it's kind of like a slightly tedious diversion of the Tyrion chapters for him to have to go to the brothel and then go on to Shae every time he wants to see Shae. So, just as a shorthand, I approve. I miss Chitaya and Alayaya. I think they would be good characters in the show, but I do understand that one.
Yeah. It's not a bad idea having her work at the Red Keep. I mean, if he's just having a fling with one of the servants at the Red Keep, I mean, it is what it is.
No one's going to care. Yeah. So, pedantry corner. If Lancel is to report that he scared Tyrion, who will henceforth give Cersei no more trouble. You almost commented on this as pedantry yourself during the discussion. But Tyrion immediately follows that up with saying that he demands that Pycelle be off the small council. That just is completely contradictory. You can't say, he's going to release him, I scared him, but Pycelle can't be on the small council anymore.
Yeah, you're right. Which is it? Did you scare him into releasing Pycelle, or is he giving up Pycelle but saying he can't be on the small council? Who's calling the shots here? Yeah, I see it.
News and notes.
So Elio Garcia and Linda Antonsen, who are actually the co-authors with George Martin on A World of Ice and Fire, and they're the workhorses behind Westeros.org, which part of that is a wiki of Ice and Fire. They tweeted out an old press release showing that in February of 1994, HarperCollins won the UK rights to the then trilogy of A Song of Ice and Fire for £450,000. You see, I didn't know how to make the pound symbol on my keyboard.
I can see that, yeah. Yeah.
So I just put...
There's no easy way.
Which would be about 913,000 pounds today. And the losing contender, a man named John Gerald from Random House, said that his losing bid was the highest final offer he'd ever made in 15 years as a publisher. So, Elio and Linda also mentioned that it was never revealed to the public what the winning bid was for the U.S. rights, but that it was a rather large number. So I just thought that was kind of neat. It was actually, a picture of the press release showing HarperCollins winning the bid for the then trilogy. Of course, we've only 2 books beyond that now.
So 27 years later.
I guess even back in 94, it was just a theoretical trilogy because not all 3 books are out by then.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. So we got a review on podchaser.com from Uraj Japama. Love the chapter reviews and character breakdown. Really helps keep track of things. So thank you. Appreciate that.
And I like the name.
So let's conclude. Tyrion has a loyal, although unwilling, spy at the very heart of Cersei's intrigues. It's going to give him a significant upper hand. Yeah,
and she's playing with her poor copy of Jaime, and we discussed whether or not it's dangerous, but your rationale makes sense. That the murder of Robert, which is the dangerous part, her connection to Robert, the murder is gray enough and easily distanceable enough that might not be all that dangerous to keep him around for the moment.
But we saw in this chapter, he does have loose lips.
Yes, he does.
When threatened.
Yes, he does.
Yeah. So Pycelle's getting out. He definitely won't be Tyrion's friend, but it was probably a relationship worth sacrificing for Lancel's loyalty, which again goes to the sort of chess game that Tyrion's playing.
Yes, right. Yeah. No,
he could have beheaded Pycelle, but that would have just further entrenched our positions. This way, I've got a spy in Cersei's ranks.
Yeah.
He couldn't have known that that's what was going to happen, but that's he knew she would have to make a move to respond to the Pycelle thing.
He thought, this is going to come back to benefit me in some way, and this is the way that taking Pycelle benefited him. Now, of course, he has now released someone who's likely an enemy, at the very least, staunchly in Cersei's camp. May that become problematic for Tyrion? I don't know. It's possible. But there's also possibly a new spot on the small council because Tyrion's demands for being coerced into releasing Grand Maester Pycelle is that he cannot fill a spot on the small council.
Just saying.
So,
if I were Lancel, I would report all that like this. I would say, I put my hand on my sword and he crumbled and he said, I'll release Pycelle. And then I would just say under my breath, and he wants him off the small council.
Well, maybe don't even tell her. When he doesn't show up to small council meetings, Cersei will just think he's old. Yeah. He forgot. He forgot what time it was supposed to be at.
Maybe, yeah. Don't say anything. And then when Pycelle comes to his next small council meeting and Tyrion's like, what the hell? Then Cersei looks at Lancel and Lancel puts his hand back on his sword again.
Remember.
Hey, little fella. You remember.
Yeah, but I wonder if... we know that Cersei has basically filled all the missing... all the recently empty spots on the small council with just yes men who will agree with everything Cersei says. I wonder if Tyrion will pick someone a little more useful, someone who might be actually providing useful insight and not just someone who will agree with everything that he wants to do.
Isn't there already a spot on the small council going because of Janos Slynt's absence, or was he replaced?
That's a good question. No, he wasn't replaced. No,
I don't think so either, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. There's 2 spots.
Yep. The women of Chataya's whorehouse are very good to Tyrion, but his escapades going to be hard to keep them a complete secret.
Right. You make a good point. It would be good if he could mix it up and not always choose Aliyaya, but that opens up his secret to more people and more people who interact with a lot of other people. Right. So
he loves Shay. We all do. But does she love him, or is she just in it for the money? I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, she is a prostitute.
Right. Yes.
She rents out her love for money.
Yes.
Is she? Are her feelings the same? I'm sure she would say they are.
Yes, I'm sure she would verbalize that as well. But
Yep.
I think that's also part of my issue. You know, like I was saying earlier, that there's no long-term plan here. He can't keep this going forever. But also, I guess part of my issue with him falling in love with Shay is the fact that Shay is a prostitute, and her job is, in some ways, to make him fall in love with her.
Right.
And he's falling into that trap, possibly.
Yeah. But of course, I mean, it may be that she really loves him. He's a likable kind of guy in some ways, and he's her ticket out of this life. And so she could well truly be in love with him.
Yes, you're right. I had not thought about it from that perspective. Yeah, that's a possibility as well. So Tyrion thinks he's found his calling, and you know, it's a temporary role, and he's got growing enemies on all sides, but he is doing well right now. I mean, you know, things are going his way, and he's definitely feeling that.
Yeah. The one thing I would say is that I don't think his enemies are truly growing. I take your point. He's certainly confirmed Pycelle as an enemy, but Pycelle was always a lackey of Cersei, and Cersei is Tyrion's enemy, and so he's not really growing his circle of enemies. He's just sort of confirming.
He's exposing them.
Yeah, he might as well make enemies of the people who were already his enemies. Lackeys.
Yeah. I guess I was thinking of the enemies swirling around King's Landing. The Baratheon brothers, now they've gone off and fighting themselves.
Oh.
They got the Starks.
Yeah.
You know, at some point, you think they're going to get it together. Maybe not, but you'd think at some point.
But the flip side of that is, it doesn't matter what he does, that's happening. You know, he can't control anything outside King's Landing. You know, those blows are going to fall when they fall.
Right.
He can only sort of try to control what's going on inside.
And prepare
King's Landing
for when they do come.
Prepare for it, exactly, yeah.
And then, of course, the primary question is what happens when Dad gets back to town.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we've hit the nail on the head. There's 2 jobs and 2 of them, you know?
Yeah.
Just split them up. Whichever one Tywin wants, he gets, and Tyrion does the other one.
Sure, as long as Tywin's cool with that plan.
Right, but if I was Tywin and I wanted to be Hand of the King, given what I'm seeing Tyrion doing, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I mean, actually, that's a little bit too much. Tyrion is playing the Game of Thrones, right? I mean, he is doing that, which is good because we need someone to counterbalance Cersei. Is he actually making the city better? Is he actually proving a good administrator? He seems to stay up late, churning the numbers and things like that. But that's the bit that if I was Tywin, I would want. I don't really want him to match Cersei in machinations. I want to come to King's Landing and find that it's organised and orderly and the streets are safe and the defences are ready.
Yes.
You know?
Yes, and I think Tyrion would do that more if he wasn't as distracted.
So busy matching the machinations of his sister. Yes.
Which is why he liked her being poisoned and stuck on the privy. He could make unilateral decisions at that point.
Oh, just one last thing before we leave this. Right at the start of this chapter, when Tyrion is disturbed by Podrick and told that Lancel's here, he uses a thing called the guard robe.
Yeah.
Did you notice that word?
I did.
And I had to look it up because I wasn't sure. Basically, it's a toilet cut out in the wall of a castle, and you do your business down it, and it just rolls on down the walls of the castle. Better than nothing. Probably a little nasty in the long term.
Okay.
But the day... So I read this chapter for the first time, I don't know, about a week ago. Well, not for the first time ever. For the first time for this. And the next day I was reading another book, and it had the same word in the chapter that I read that day.
Get out.
I am not joking. It absolutely did.
Huh. This is the second time that's happened to you.
I believe that has happened on a different thing, I often have that. When I'm reading multiple books, I often have strange coincidences between them.
Yeah. See? Growing your vocabulary.
These things do happen.
One chapter at a time.
Yeah. All right, as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhall@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter at Ghost Harrenhall. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Discord. Well, McKelly is, let's be honest.
We do have fun on the Discord server, so I do urge you to go out and come hang out with us out there.
Oh, on the subject of social things, our listener Rob in the UK sent us a wedding photo, so congratulations to Rob.
Yes, Rob and Andrea, congratulations. Those were amazing. Yes. I appreciate you sending us those photos. It was really cool to see.
Yeah.
And if you wouldn't all mind going out and leaving us a 5-star rate and a glowing review, we certainly would appreciate it. And if you do, we very well might read it in a future episode.
Definitely will. All right, thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.